You're listening to the Coop Homeschool Podcast.
This is your podcast for community, humility, and joyful fun in homeschooling. I'm Mandy.
I'm Jessica.
And this is The Coop. Never say never.
What?
Yes, we're going to talk about things that you said you'd never do as a parent.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's a fun one. So, but let's first do our scoop on the coop.
Okay. So back from holidays, and I was so excited to start our new semester, but was nervous because I'm undertaking a whole California unit study, and it's a lot of work. Like a lot of stuff that we're going through, and I don't do a lot of rigorous academic work at my house, and so I was nervous, but Sophia has been loving it.
That's so cool.
And granted, it's only week 2, but every day she's been asking if we can do our California study, and then she's been, like, is there more that we can do? So I've been able to move at the faster pace I had hoped that we could, because I'm squeezing in a year-long study into one semester. And so it's been really awesome, and I'm glad that she's really into it. And I feel surprised, but I feel like I shouldn't be surprised. I should just be thankful that she's excited to learn it. And I hope that I've been enthusiastic and maybe I'm rubbing off on her. I don't know. But I'm excited. And then we're pairing it with our Oceans unit study from Gather Around Homeschool. And so we're doing 2 unit studies.
Where'd you get your California unit study?
So it's a bunch of stuff I put together. Okay. But the main backbone of it is California out of the box. Mm-hmm. And so it incorporates primary and secondary sources. So it's going to include a lot of literature, a lot of reading. And then it has us use the Roughing It book by Mark Twain. Cool. And it has us using the California Audubon Society guide.
That's so much better than just like memorizing a bunch of facts and like this mission was established at this date.
Totally.
And that's what comes up on Teacher Pay Teachers. Like when you look at missions on Teacher Pay Teachers, it's like a listing of missions in the order that they were incorporated or whatever with the years. And it never looked appealing to me to teach because I was just like, I'm not going to have my kids memorize this stuff.
It's super rad because we're starting off with California habitats and stuff like that. And so it's just really kind of digging into what's around us. And she's very interested in ecosystems. We have the game ecologies, which you build healthy ecologies. And so she's familiar with our coastal ecologies and the chaparral and all of those different areas. And it just talks about how rich California is with variety of species. And it's really cool. We do live in a really cool place. Yeah. And makes it really neat to learn about.
Sounds like a road trip in the making.
It is.
That's what's fun when you do your state, because you can actually go visit these places that are historic places.
Right.
Yeah.
Or we're living in one or whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah. It's super cool.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. Well, my scoop is I asked my kids to pick a theme day they want to plan this year. I mean, of course, I'm leading the planning, but they get input, and my son picked video games day. So if he could plan the day exactly the way he wanted it, it would have just been video games all day.
Right.
Which for me is not good enough. So we had a lot of fun. We just had it last week, and I used these 2 books. I'm holding them up here. I have the Usborne STEM Technology Scribble book, which has the exercises that we did, like creating an invention and things like that. Cool. And then I have 100 Things to Know About Numbers, Computers, and Coding, also by Usborne, which is more of like a textbook. And each page is just one of the 100 things. And
neat.
And some of them are about numbers. Half of it went over my head. I literally sat there and read the whole book, seeing which things would be interesting to introduce to the kids. But some things were really fun, like talking about bugs for computers. Well, it came about because when a computer was an entire room, it was really warm, and so a lot of bugs flocked to these computer rooms. Yeah, and there was literally a moth stuck. Yeah. And so they had to debug
that's gross.
the computer room, and that's why there's debugging. So we learn things like that. We learn lingo like glitch and debugging and binary code and things like that. And so it was really fun because first we talked about inventions, and our inventions are a good thing, pros and cons. And we watched Eli Whitney and the Cotton Gin. There's a TED Talk. It's a TED Ed 5-minute thing. Right. And it's really cool because my husband's like, oh, I talk about this in one of my like American history classes. But the cotton gin was actually detrimental to American because of it heightened the need for slavery.
Right.
And it catapulted the number of slaves and because cotton was king.
Right.
But if it wasn't for the cotton gin, cotton wouldn't be king.
Right.
And so we talked about that, and then they had to come up with some of the cons, and it was so cool. My son came up with like addiction. There's addiction, and there's danger and strangers accessing. So it was so cool that things we have taught them a little bit over time, what to be cautious of, you could see them take it to heart.
Yeah, that's really neat.
And so that was just like the background. And then we did computer languages and stuff like that. And then we did the actual video games, and they learned about Pong and the history of video game consoles. And we read a little bit of what is Nintendo. And it was just really fun. And then they watched we watched Sonic.
Oh, fun.
Yes, live action Sonic. So it was a really great day. It was what he wanted.
Yeah.
And I love making those things happen. And it gave reason to introduce these 2 books to them, and they were actually, my older 2 were fighting over who got to put these books in their room next. And I sided with my son because it was his day.
He gets it first.
Yeah, he gets it first. But to hear them fighting over it is pretty awesome.
That's really cool.
All right, so let's get to never say never. Things you never do. You said you'd never do as a parent. So I have it broken up into 3 things. Reasons we should never say never.
Okay.
Then some examples of things that I've said, and it might spark some things for you too, that I never do and what I do. And then how do we avoid saying never, things that we shouldn't do. So first, reasons we should never say never.
Okay.
You don't know what the future holds.
You don't.
And you don't want to chain yourself to something. So never saying I would never do this, or as a parent, I would never do this, because, you're the best parent before you have children, right?
So, yeah.
Or you're the best parent of an age before you're at that age.
Yep.
But it becomes a chain for you. Now you're kind of stuck with that.
Right. You're bound to that.
Yeah. So that's number 1. You don't know what the future holds. Number 2, you change constantly. Your family changes. Your friends change. And your child's development will change.
The world around you changes.
Well, that's number 3.
Oh, yes.
The world around you changes.
Yeah.
Your environment will change. Your opportunities will change. What's available, a pandemic, whatever. All those things will change. And so things you never thought you'd let your kids do, you're going to let them do.
Yep.
Number 4, your pride comes into play. So it makes it harder for you to change, because you've put it out there. I would never do this. And now
it's your word. Yeah.
It's your
You're
word.
going to go back on your word.
Yeah. And especially if you said it to other people.
Especially if you felt very proud about saying that.
Exactly.
If that lifted you up on a pedestal, because you wouldn't be that mom.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really hard to take it back.
It is. Yeah. And number 5, that goes along with it, you sound judgmental.
Yeah.
I would never let my kids get a tattoo when they turn 16.
It's very extreme. You're using extreme language.
Right.
Yeah.
Very extreme. And it's hurtful for people who would allow that, because it's just a spectrum. It's not like a right or wrong, right?
It sounds like a judgment.
Yeah. Number 6, everyone has different nevers. So your nevers impact someone else, like we just say, but they have nevers too. So how do you feel when they have nevers for something that you would allow?
Right.
So it goes both ways. And then 7, it's hard to stay optimistic when you have nevers, because you can't do mind over matter, because you've set a boundary, you've set a line.
Right.
And so there you go.
Yeah,
so those are reasons we should never say never.
Yes.
Okay, so now I'm going to just talk about some nevers that I've said.
Okay.
Screen time, or like TV time or movie time, whatever you want to call it. I was like, my kids will never have more than like 2 hours a week of screen time.
Yep.
Yeah, and so it's really humbling, because on some days we do a whole marathon of a certain show or a certain...
Right.
You
exceed that 2 hours in one day.
Yeah, and then what's funny is, if I'm not in control of that, but like the spouse does that, then I'm all worked up. Why would you let them watch all that? I'm not saying never, but it's easy to get mad at someone else for doing that. But I have a good reason to do it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Food. So I had a friend who, before I ever had kids, she would come into work and she'd say, oh, it was so annoying. I made scrambled eggs for this kid. I made, it was like egg and a toast for this other kid. And then this other kid wanted a bacon, egg, and cheese croissant. And I was like, what in the world?
Yeah, what are you doing?
And she actually had 4 kids. I'm like, I would never do that. But what do? Oh, who wants scrambled eggs? I'm making scrambled eggs. Okay, and then what do you want? Oh, you want yogurt and whatever.
You're shorter to cook.
Yeah, and so then I have done that because it's just easier in the moment, like to do that work instead of battling what they're eating. Have you ever done anything like that?
So, I mean, I make multiple meals sometimes. When it's dinner though, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And, you eat what's on the table. If you at least take your no thank you bite, then you can eat something
I love the
different
no thank you bite.
That's healthy, but I am not cooking you something.
Yeah.
You can get out yogurt or cottage cheese or something else, sourdough toast with butter. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm not cooking separate foods.
Yeah. And I'm not to read into anything.
Yeah.
But don't you feel pretty good about that, right?
Yes and no. I mean, it's frustrating. You
know?
It's
hard.
Like, I don't always feel like I'm winning, but I do prefer the consistency of that.
Yeah. And so then when you feel good about something, it's easier than, I don't know if you do say I would never do that, but it's easier too because you feel, oh, this is a strong conviction of mine.
Yeah.
Like I would say, my kids are always going to have a vegetable.
Right.
They're always going to eat, and I'm going to make them eat all their vegetables because I was made to eat all my vegetables. I couldn't leave the table. But now I can't imagine doing that. Well, I've done it, but I won't do that all the time.
Right.
So it's just so funny, these things. Like,
I know. So I think I learned a long time ago because I used to try to do these things to myself, set my own goals, but I would treat them like they were the standard. And I felt so disappointed in myself anytime I couldn't live up to something. And so I think I stopped using language like that because I saw what it was doing to me, let alone what I was holding other people to or letting them hold me accountable to.
Right.
Because when you say it out loud, other people are holding you to that now.
Yeah, totally.
It's not just your own mental, game.
Right.
You've said it. And so I'm not saying I haven't done that because I think Jake and I, as, parents to be, we definitely have made observations in life and go, oh, we're not going to do that. Yeah. But we try really hard to only say it to each other.
Right.
And then at the same time, I'm usually that person who's like, well, I don't have a teenager. So it's easy for me to make this
Well, it's really easy
role.
for us to say stuff about teenagers, right?
Right.
Like, oh, well, that's why I would never do this. And sometimes when I hear, I don't know if he's done this, but I can feel me and Jake probably having that kind of conversation and then smirking.
Sure. Right.
Because knowing like,
yeah, sure.
We have no idea, really.
Right. Whereas, I'm going to sit around and go, oh, but you don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My brain just doesn't think in absolutes.
Yeah. My kid is not going to date until they're this age.
Yeah. I think the one I feel most strongly about that I know Jake and I have discussed are cell phones.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because Sophia has a cell phone now, but not like, it's just my old cell phone.
But if you were like super black and white,
right. I might feel like that, but she also doesn't have it connected to a service. And so she has no internet on it. She can't look things up. She has no attachment to Siri. So it's basically just, it plays her white noise at night.
Yeah.
And then, for audiobooks. Yeah. So it's basically an iPod.
It's an iPad. Yeah.
Or an MP3 player, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
However, Jake and I have had lots of conversations about letting her have cell phones or social media and all that stuff. But at the same time, I tell Jake, you know what? I just don't know that I can make those hard and fast rules until we get there because I think each kid is different. And while there's certain things that I don't want for my kid, I don't know. When she's not with me all the time, do I want to be able to get a hold of her? I kind of do.
So I've definitely said they can not have a cell phone until they're 16, until they have one in their car.
Driving.
The car, because that was the rule for me.
Right.
But no, definitely I have said no, never any social media. But here's the thing, like, I know about the research of that. I do not want them to have social media. No. But what if by that time there's a social media where it filters out anyone that uses like certain words can't be used that are are mean words. I mean, I'm sure people can
right,
work
right.
their way
There's,
around
yeah.
it, whatever. But who knows what's going to be created. Right. But as of right now, as the world as it stands, it's detrimental in my heart. I think it's detrimental to children to have social media. But that's like a morality statement there.
Right.
That's like an extreme.
Yep.
And then if I go now and let them have social media at age 14, do I not think it's that? And who did I make feel bad by saying,
right.
oh no, I would not do that? And
right.
wonderful parents that are better at parenting
right.
than me.
That I love and respect.
Are allowing it. So what kind of parameters do they have? So these absolutes get us into trouble.
Slippery slope, man.
Yeah.
So, I think that it's important to know what your boundaries are as a parent, but to be cautious of your wording, because you don't know what's going to change.
I know.
You don't know.
So my husband and I were talking about slumber parties, and
right.
I had said never any slumber parties, ever. And then, but for me, the principle is I don't want any mixed gender in the home or even accessible to the home.
Right.
And so when my husband and son were gone, then it's just me and the girls. Yeah, then I was like, okay, who can we have over? And so that's an absolute. That's not really an absolute. It's the principle. So looking at the principle and the spirit of it of, I don't want my son or my husband ever being accused of something that they didn't do, hopefully didn't do.
Right.
And I don't want, like, especially when my son's a teenager, to be tempted to do something out of curiosity.
Right.
So I would never want to put him in that situation. No. But, and so in the spirit of that, if they're not there, and then there's the other factor where I'm like, I also don't trust like young teenagers and what girls will talk about and what they'll do, because like, who knows if they're going to leave the house at night while I'm sleeping, and I'm responsible for these girls. So that matters to me too. So now I'm like, well, now I have this window. They're 10. They're not going to leave the house.
Right.
So my daughter can have a couple people over, send everyone else away, and I know that's the safe. So I'm taking back my never.
Right.
But that's the principle. Like, what's the spirit? What was the spirit of the never? And so instead of saying never, it'd be like, I don't want to have a summer party where mixed gender is at risk, and where the responsibility of my responsibility of the children is questioned. Right. And what I'm able to watch. And then those parameters can be met. Yeah. So it was just funny because my husband's like, yeah, so here it's looking at the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. Right. And that's what we have to remember with our nevers. Yep. And never. Oh, I saw something with Netherlands and I wanted to say Neverland. So I said I would never assign a grade level. Oh, yes. And I wrote a whole blog about it. You can check it out on our I'll link it on the podcast page. But I said I would never assign a grade level to my kids because that is confining to the traditional school model. Right. But yet I have done that. Right. Because I wanted funding from the traditional school. Right. The charter school. Right. So another thing I said I would never do busy work. I'm not going to waste my kids' time with busy work. Well, what defines busy work? These absolutes, you don't even define these things. No. You don't spell them out. You don't create a whole document about it. But when I'm sitting there and I'm even gather around, when I turn to a page and I'll start filling this out, I'm like, oh, never mind. You don't need to copy that verse. Right. Like, we do our own copy work of verses, right? Right. So, but here I'm like, oh wait, how can we use this page differently? Let's just discuss the verse. Right. Exactly. But if I walked away and said, do this page, which I do that for some things, and I'll be back and we'll discuss it, and then look at it closer, I'm like, ooh, what a waste of time. Right. But I have a life to lead. I'm not just educating my children. I'm doing everything else in the world, Yeah. So busy work is going to happen. It's unavoidable, especially if they already know something, but you don't realize they already know something. And then they do it some more. You're like, oh yeah, you already knew that. That was a waste of time. Whoops. Yeah. So, anything else for you that you can think of?
Not that I can think of.
Yeah. No. So, okay. So those are just some ideas of things we do as parents that we say we never would do. Mm-hmm.
I would never send my kids to public school.
Yeah. So,
but I feel like I do have a caveat to that. I think I've said before, like, I mean, I'd be willing to talk to them if they got to a certain age and they really felt strongly that was the right place for them. You know, like I'd be willing to talk about it.
Right.
But I don't think that I would enroll my kids of my own volition, you know, but I don't have to face that decision.
You say it. That's how you say it. So instead of saying I would never put my kids in traditional school, I don't plan to, but we don't know.
Right.
And so when people ask me too, like, are you going to homeschool them the whole time? I kind of, in my heart, I'm like, yes. But then I also don't want to come across as judgmental and hurt someone's feelings who's a teacher.
Right.
You know, and just say, well, you never know. You don't. And that's exactly what you were saying earlier.
Right.
We can't say I never put my kid in traditional school because we don't know.
Right. Even if I feel strongly about that.
Yeah. Because if I got paralyzed and I couldn't
come up with such extreme things.
I couldn't do all the things that I wanted to do, or it took me forever to take care of the house, and I couldn't help them with their stuff for some reason. Or I couldn't get them to their sports. Then I would put them in traditional school so they could have their sports and their friends, because I'm not able, or I go blind. If I go blind, I'm not going to be able to drive them anywhere.
Right.
So at a certain point, so that goes with that, you don't know what's going to change.
No, you don't.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's go into our third part, which is how do we avoid saying never?
Yes.
So these are just some tips.
Okay.
Like you were saying. So identify that you are doing this. Like, first acknowledge, like sit down and think of when have I done this? Like, I would never put my kids in traditional school, or I can't remember the other thing you said, but so I did that. I sat down and said, what are some things that I have said even 15 years ago or 20 years ago? When have I done this? And think of now how, like, okay, I've identified that these are my extremely strong opinions. Let's delete the word never from them.
Yeah.
When I'm talking to people or new homeschoolers or whatever. Number 2, make a list of your nevers that you have broken to humble yourself. So it's this is like a really important part of the process, is humbling ourselves, because anytime we're around someone, including ourselves, that talk in absolutes, it like you were saying, it puts ourselves up on this pedestal. Yeah. And then it's hard on us when we have to break them. And then it's like we kind of try and rationalize it. Well, that's because of this and this. Yeah, but you still said never say never.
Right.
So instead of doing that, just say, oh, if the conditions are right, who knows?
Right.
But based on the conditions I know about right now, that's not something I would do. So just humble yourself to say, like, oh yeah, I need to stop talking that way.
Yeah.
And that is wrong of me. And then number 3, realize that when we say those things, that we're putting out a morality. Mm-hmm. And, if it's not black and white, right and wrong, like, of course we're going to say, well, I would never abuse my children. Like, okay, that should be a never. Right.
Right.
But most things aren't that. Like, no. I'm never going to drop my kid off at age 6 at the park and drive off.
Right.
Like, obviously. But those are the extremes that are right and wrong. But everything else is in between. And it's so easy for us to judge, either just privately with our spouse, privately within ourselves. And so if we can realize that we're making something right and wrong that's not in the Bible is right and wrong. And, you need to put your kids in a sport at this age or they won't be any good at it. I mean, possibly.
Right.
But it could be like Missy Copeland. She started dance, she said, at
12.
Yeah. So it's possible.
Right.
So
there's kids who start sports at 4 and never
become
a talented sportster.
Yeah, exactly. But for us to put out those absolutes. So the never say never is really just the absolutes. And so I'm totally guilty of that because I'm an impassioned talker. And but I don't ever really mean it. I don't mean the never, but it's just how I talk.
Right, you talk.
I'm an aggressive talker. Yeah. So so just allowing for wisdom, and that it's not right or wrong. It's just a spectrum, and it's not. There's no formula.
No.
And so just knowing that about yourself. So that's just a fun little.
That's fun.
Yeah. So okay, so let's do our question.
Yeah. What's our question today?
Okay, well, the Coop Q&A.
Oh, yeah. forgot how to do our intro.
Yeah, where we answer your question. Should I order a downloadable version of the curriculum or a paper copy?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, because so a lot of these homeschool curriculums, they say, oh, you can buy the downloadable or we'll print a paper copy. And a lot of times they're comparable in price.
Sure.
But the downloadable is nice because then you can print multiples for your various kids. And a lot of times the downloadable is like the family pack. I'm just thinking of certain ones that we do.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't take up space.
Right.
So what do you like about the downloadable?
Well, the downloadable I like because I can print out only what I need and I don't feel like I'm wasting so much. And so there's the customization that I like about it. And then I would say that I've noticed that typically the downloadable version is less expensive than the printed mailed to you version.
Yeah,
so if we're talking about the unit study like Gather Round, I think that can be cheaper, especially when right now I only need to buy, like the package that I buy is $20 versus the $50
I
for
buy
everybody.
$54 or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you were to buy the 3 workbooks and the teacher guide printed and mailed to you, that would still probably be more than $54. Not sure. But anyway, but I do like the customization of the downloadable, and I like that I can have it on my computer. I like...
Because there's links.
Right.
There's links
and you can to click. Yeah. So there's some things that I do like about the digital version. So not even the printable aspect of it, but just the purely digital. And then I'm not storing a paper copy and wanting to be able to come back to it. So I like that I have it for longevity also when I have the downloadable.
That's what I was going to say about that too, because homegrown preschooler, I bought the paper version and it's in these binders and they take up at least 1.5 feet of space. Because I put each page in a sheet protector because you want to protect it. And I didn't have, I should go in and just coil bind it now. Use a coil binder.
Yeah.
But it takes up so much space. Now, what's nice about it is you can flip through pretty quickly and move around a lot more easily. You're not like, oh, shoot, now I need to print off this page because I don't have this page printed. But again, it's only a paper copy. So if I lose that, I've lost the curriculum.
Right. And if you didn't make copies of it the first time and the kids wanted to redo something or whatever it is, it's done.
Yeah. Or they spilt all over it.
It's done.
Because that just happened today with our human unit body study. My son was pushing his book and it knocked over. I have a little vase of wildflowers that Maisie picked for me, spilled. And I'm like, ah! And I'm like, monster mom, like getting everything off the table. And things only got splashed on, so it didn't completely ruin anything. But I'm an inkjet. So if it gets wet, it's like
everywhere.
Yeah, it's a puddle of ink. Which is the other thing, too, about printing it, though, is that like with sweaty hands and things like that, it will smear. My printer doesn't work very well now. It gives it weird colors.
Right.
And then it takes a while to print everything.
Yeah.
There's something wonderful about getting something in the mail that you can hold and look at. And the print job is beautiful. It's done hopefully they do a good job, but it's done by laser or it's bound.
Here's the thing about the Gather Round that's not the same for everything else, but I think that in general, the student workbook is not a big deal to me. I could care less whether I printed it or if you mailed it to me. But the teacher version, I want it on my computer. I don't want the paper version of it. It's difficult for me to manage so many things on the table at one time. It's easier for me to do that. So for instance, for their math curriculum, for Math UC, I like to order the student workbook and then I have the digital pack.
Okay.
And then that gives me access to the videos and it gives me access to the teacher guide as a PDF.
I didn't see the digital pack when I was ordering ours
I think now it's all combined.
Okay.
Because I think you just get it all as a package. So if you do the level up package, I think it all comes combined now. They don't a la carte it the way that they used to.
Okay.
And so I used to just a la carte the student workbook and then the digital teacher pack.
Yeah, because here's the problem with the teacher hardcover. It's the teacher with all the answers in it. I have to go find it. Whereas if it was just on my laptop, I could
just
be
it's
all in one place. And that's what's nice. I can pull up all my Gather Round unit studies if I'm looking for something. I can pull up
3 different math levels that
yeah,
your kids
that would
are
be
in.
so convenient. Yeah, ours are DVDs, and I have a laptop that has a DVD player, and that's the only way we can watch it. And once that DVD player goes, I'm going to be stuck.
Right. Well, you should have access to the digital pack, but so you can watch all those same videos on the website. So you just have lifetime access to it, which is neat.
So, so I think we're siding on the side of downloadable.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, and then when you circle back like 6 years later and you want to circle back and go deeper, especially these unit studies that cross different levels.
Yep.
You can circle back and print other parts of it or dive deeper. But it's all there. You're not holding it in your bookshelf for 6 more years. Or if you have a second kid coming up and now they're going to do it, like your kids are 6 years apart. Mm-hmm. So 6 years from now it's just still on your computer.
Exactly.
No big deal.
No big deal.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks for listening. We love your support. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, leave a rating and review to let us know how we're doing, and share our podcast with your friends who need a little community, humility, and joyful fun in homeschooling.